Right, moving on. I want to talk about a player that's actually on the Celtics right now.
Fair.
If anyone follows me on Twitter, they've probably seen me going back and forth with people for the past 48 hours.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah. Very disappointed in myself for buying into the arguments. But here we are, you know. There's a lot of people saying that Grant Williams needs to be traded and you can get an upgrade on Grant Williams. Now, the first question I have is, what upgrade? Considering Grant Williams' contract, considering where the Celtics are financially, also keeping in mind that you cannot put a TPE on top of a contract. You can't be like, Grant makes $5 million, we've got a 5.6 million TPE, let's go and get a 10.6 million player. That don't work. You either use the player's salary or the TPE. You can't combine the two to make a larger number. So keeping that in mind, I just don't think there's a trade out there that builds on what Grant gives you. You know, I've seen some people be like, Naz Reid, and I'm like, dude, I feel like I've started the entire Naz Reid thing now. I don't know whether that's a little bit of mate character syndrome or something creeping in, but I remember
we did talk about it a while ago. At this point, it's been a while,
and now his name's floating around, right? And you know, maybe it's a coincidence, whatever. But I've had people be like, Naz Reid's an upgrade. I'm like, but Naz Reid isn't a 3-and-D wing. Like, you're telling me Naz Reid's an upgrade and he'd play better in Grant Williams' role, but Naz Reid is a 33% three-point shooter. That's fine when you're playing the 5. When you're playing the 4 and the 3, that don't work. So I'm just like, I don't know where the upgrade is. I actually think Grant has wildly improved his game throughout the offseason and coming into the season. He's scoring off the bounce. He's attacking out of the corners. You know, he waits for those closeouts, then drives hard. He's shown an ability to create for himself a little bit with those fake dribble handoffs or with attacking closeouts above the perimeter. He's flashed a bit of an improved post game, and he's defending at a better rate, and he's defending some opposing teams' best players. He's also got a very good track record against some of the bigs that you'd expect to see if you got into a deep playoff run. He's got a good track record on Jokic. If it ends up being a Boston-Denver finals, you feel comfortable with Grant going on Jokic. He's got a good track record against... I think he's got a good track record against Embiid.
And Giannis to a degree.
And Giannis, this is what I'm saying, right? So now all of a sudden, 3 of the significantly talented big men in the NBA, Grant Williams is proven to be able to hang with them defensively. And when you're telling me you can upgrade for, what's Grant on this year, like 4.8 mil?
I could pull up the exact number.
Yeah, put it up while I'm talking. It's around about that. It's a low number. You're telling me there's a player out there that's going to upgrade on both sides of the floor and give you the 3-point shooting, the 40 plus 40% 3-point shooting, are going to give you the defense, like elite level defense on some of the best bigs in the NBA, and going to give you an ability to attack off the dribble a little bit, to run some fake DHO actions. He's a really good screener, a willing screener. He's strong, he's sturdy, he's good at flipping angles on his screens too. If you can find me a guy that does all that, and he's better at it all than Grant, cool. But I just don't think it's there right now. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. Just at the price point the Celtics are at, I just don't see it being there.
Yeah, I mean, he's getting paid $4.3 million.
I was close.
Yeah, you were damn close. I think the issue that I have is obviously worrying about free agency. He's definitely going through a slump. Do I think he can break out of it? Sure. I think him struggling right now sort of highlights a lot of the issues that the Celtics are having. Like when their offense goes stagnant and guys just aren't knocking down shots, it's really killing them. And I don't think that's entirely on him, but it's the same thing that happens like with Sam Hauser, right? Like when all of a sudden these guys who are hitting their shots aren't hitting their shots, the offense stops working. And that's what it is for most teams. Like if guys start slumping, they start slumping. And I don't think that means that you hit the panic button with Grant. I really don't. I understand that he is one of your better trade chips. If you're thinking that there's any chance that he doesn't come back, then you try and move him at the deadline for a player that helps you, a player that's under contract, that brings something to the table. I wouldn't move him for Naz Reid.
Here's where sorry to cut you.
No.
Here's where I differ with that mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're talking about making trades and stuff to anyone right now, the answer is, hey, you do what you need to do to win a championship.
Yeah.
Right? You don't trade Peyton Pritchard right now because he gives you the depth to win a championship.
Yeah.
Well, then at the same time, you have to be like, you're not really upgrading Grant Williams at $4.3 million in salary matching. So guess what? You risk losing him for nothing at the end of the season to give yourself a chance to win the championship. That's my outlook on it.
And I think that's totally fair. I mean, there's only a couple other guys that I would consider that I would, slide into that same spot that you've got Grant in. Like Jared Vanderbilt makes a lot of sense to me.
I'd do
He's
that.
young. He's a great defender. And I think that's like one of those ones where it's like, you're going to have to worry about free agency, but you have one more year of control. So you wouldn't have to worry about signing him in the offseason. You'd have one more year after that. He's hitting about $4.37 million.
The problem
roughly.
is who becomes a free agent at the end of next season.
Yeah, exactly. So and then that also ties into the conversation.
That didn't know,
and that ties into the conversation about KD as well, where you talk about contract control, and that's really what it is. You're gonna pay a tax. You're paying a tax regardless, just because you're trying to win a championship. And Wick Grousbeck has come out and said, this is load up this year, do whatever you got to do. So I can see them going deep into the tax, but I don't think that they get better by trading Grant unless it's a significant upgrade. And then again, if it's a significant upgrade, you need to match that salary. And
it's not there. There's no price.
You're talking about multiple pieces. You're talking about throwing Gallinari in a trade. And unless it's for a guy like Kevin Durant, where it's like, okay, understandable, you're going to have this optic of trading a guy who's injured, who wanted to play for this organization, sign there as a free agent. Like, it's not a good look. Like, if you're going to move on from a guy, it needs to be a surefire thing. It needs to really just like knock the cover off the ball. And I just don't see there any kind of deal that's going to, materialize like that.
And let me just kind of defend myself here. I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying you've said this, but just so everyone listening or watching can understand or just appreciate what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying Grant Williams is irreplaceable. I'm not saying he's the best small, like undersized, big wing, whatever you want to classify him as in the league. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is he's among the best 3-and-D bigs, 3-and-D wings in the league right now. Plays to 3, plays to 4. I classify 1 and 2 as guards, 3 and 4 as wings, 5 as a big. That's how I do it. Some people classify 4 and 5 as bigs, fine. But when I say wings, I always mean 3 and 4. So he's a 3-and-D wing with the ability to slide up and play some small ball 5, right? He's one of the best in the league at his role. He's not the best. PJ Tucker probably still owns that, but he's declining quite quickly. So what I'm saying is I would much rather have a chance of winning a championship this year and risk losing him for nothing at the end of the season than I would trading him away and being worse as you go into the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think that's a totally fair point to have. I think the only instance where I move him is if it's a part of like a bigger deal that brings in someone who is like a surefire under contract, is in the same echelon as Grant. And I just don't, it's really hard because those guys that are in that same echelon that you'd want to trade for, they're not necessarily available. It takes two teams to tango with that stuff. So it's always sticky when it comes to those kind of trades. Half the time you got to understand what's realistic, what's not realistic, what's possible with the cap sheet, what teams are willing to do. And does that go up because, he is going to be a restricted free agent. You're going to get his rights if you traded for him and so on and so forth. But I think the discourse around Grant is kind of misplaced at this point. Like, he's not the reason why they're struggling. He's part of it. And it's just, guys just got to, I think this, this All-Star break is going to help guys. I think they just need to take a little bit of a rest.
I mean, players always tend to slump as we enter February. End of January into the start of February. They've been playing non-stop since October, and then everybody gets a bit of time off, So I don't read too much into the slumps because I just expect them. I expect, nobody's, consistency is great, and I understand it's the holy grail of being a superstar in the NBA. And there's a reason there's so few superstars because of how hard it is to be that consistent. And even those superstars, everybody slumps. It's normal. You don't have weeks at work where you're like, man, it's been a bad week. Just, I haven't hit my deadlines, or everything I've done hasn't really worked out. Everybody slumps at everything. Even when you're driving, I have weeks where I'm just like, dude, I just haven't had it this week driving. Do you know what I mean? Parking's been a bit more difficult, or, maybe I've had to swerve because I've mistimed pulling out. You know what I mean? Like, it happens. So I just kind of think that, you kind of have to take the good with the bad, especially if a 4th-year guy. Like, everyone forget he's only been in the league 4 years.
They've got him flagged also as the replacement for Al Horford. I'm pretty sure that was Steve Bulpett who said that in his article for Heavy, that they've got him. They're going to get a contract figured out in the offseason. If anything, this slump's going to make it a little bit easier to go to the negotiations and say, well, look, you kind
Oh,
of
you
had
say
a little.
that unless he goes off in the playoffs a couple of times.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
what, if he does and it ends in a championship, I could care less.
But that's where my arguments have been, right?
Exactly.
Like everyone's making a decision, like a financial decision for him based on his play in January, when really it's his play in the summer that makes a difference.